Good morning, everyone. Welcome to admin. Annie.
All right, it looks like online we have Andrew Chorney, Cheryl Hartman, Christina Devoir, Alicia Buckles, Maddie Scott, Melissa Fisher, Michael Grimmett, and MCAT. In 206, we have Commissioner Vero, Stromeyer, and Slotnick, Brian West, Carrie Powers, Matt Jennings, Ann Hughes, Annie Cathy, Chris Lounsbury, and Allison France. Hi, Allison. Bryce Christensen, Tyler Burnett, Shira Scott, Kim Seeberger, and Abby Tallman.
Thank you.
What?
Alex.
Alex. Oh, did I get your first name wrong? I'm sorry.
Andy. It's Andy?
Oh,
I get it wrong. Oh, geez, I got it wrong. Yeah. See, I fixed you. I'm trying to correct you and I'm still.
Andy works for the Missoulian.
Oh, great, thanks.
Okay, is there any public comment on items not on the agenda?
Excuse you.
Did you bring enough to share with?
Yes. Oh, okay, consent agenda. 3 items. Anything needs to be pulled out or discussed separately?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion or public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good. Action items, 40.
Yeah. We're just
And okay, correspondence. On to discussion. So we're beginning our 2025, sorry.
Just had one thought, because given that it looks like we're gonna have to do some litigation strategy, I think we're doing this in the right order.
We are only because I don't know if at some point the county attorney's office will move to close the meeting. And so rather than kick everybody out and bring everybody back.
Okay, great.
Thanks for.
And that is fine. I think we were not going to recommend closing for this particular discussion. However, during the discussion, something could arise, so I'll leave it to your discretion on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're beginning our 2025 budget request overviews and presentations. So county attorney.
Thank you. Commissioners, I have a handout. Of course, you probably should have received this, but I don't expect you to remember every budget request that you do receive. So the county attorney's office had 3 requests this year. I'm going to start in reverse order, though, jumping down to number 3, because this is easy for you, because number 3 was withdrawn. And but I do think it's important to sort of discuss the perspective that my office has taken in budget requests from you. You may have heard last year, and of course in meetings with my office, that I'm very interested in concepts of efficiency and making sure that we're serving the public, that we're meeting our mission. In this particular economic climate and tax climate, our office is not necessarily looking for big, new, bold initiatives, though in the future we may want to pursue those. We've mostly been trying to shore up our existing programs, make sure that we're planning for the future, that we're being cutting edge within our profession, that we're addressing alternatives to always growing staffing if there's things that we can do better with existing resources. So I just wanted to mention number 3, which was the email deduplication software, which we did withdraw. But of course, you know that when we are involved in litigation or public record requests, we often get voluminous requests for emails. And as you know, if you have 20 emails in a chain with 20 different people, those all get lumped into a file. They are often very redundant. There are software programs out there that can streamline this and save staff time in the future. But because of our understanding of the current budget situation, this was originally a joint request with the comms department, and that was withdrawn. And so I just wanted to sort of acknowledge that we want to identify efficiency gains in the future, but realize the tough balancing act that you have for a lot of these programs. This is not urgent. It's not an emergency. It can wait for the future, but someday it could be really helpful to the county. Next, I'm going to go to number 2. This is sort of in between. This is a request for an add-on subscription to our LexisNexis account. So attorneys live in, I guess I shouldn't necessarily say die, but live with the need for constant legal research through a variety of different programs. For the most part in America, it's Westlaw or LexisNexis. We use Lexis. Like industries across the country and the world right now, there are new AI tools that are being adopted within these programs. So a typical attorney's job involves a huge portion of that of getting a question from somebody that they're representing, either departments or within a criminal case or through litigation, jumping onto your legal research software and starting to try and get that answer. It's really what you're trained to do in law school. And in fact, it's maybe, like, to boil it down, the entire duty of an attorney to research that law, figure out what the right answer is, and give appropriate counsel and guidance to its clients. Some of the AI tools are really amazing. So a lot of the work that we're trained to do is really using our brains to sift through the good research, the bad, make sense of it, adopt it to the current circumstances, and kind of move forward in the issue that's immediately before us. AI is fascinating. It has some limitations, but all of a sudden, research that maybe would take an attorney 3 or 5 hours to do is largely accomplished in writing a prompt in the legal research software. Now, it's not perfect, and I've sort of compared it to the equivalent of like having an intern, like a 2 or 3L intern, kind of write your preliminary work. It's like good, they got it. It's really helpful, but you're not going to submit that on its own. But we did a test of this last September for 30 days. We had all our attorneys try it out, and its potential for cost and time saving is pretty profound. So Brian's job, for instance, is routinely on a day-to-day basis answering questions from various departments. One of the natures of our job and what makes it so interesting is usually those questions haven't been answered internally before. So they start from scratch. And all of a sudden that work that can take hours to get back to somebody can often be at least initiated and started in a matter of minutes. Even transferring that into a memo type of form, cross-checking it with reading the actual cases, making sure that we're not overly relying on technology because there are some flaws within it. But it's a huge cost savings. To add that on to our existing license would be almost $34,000 a year. This is the future. This is very important. And there will be a time in our office where I say that it's basically malpractice if we don't have it. However, that time is not necessarily now. And while this is a great feature and something that would help our office, I completely understand the budget limitations with the county. And I want to tell you that if, yes, you find out that you were wrong in all your budget projections and it turns out there's a surplus and there's a lot of loose money lying around, please consider this seriously. If not, we can wait for the future, but I will probably keep bringing it up each year until we can make it work. So I just want to be honest with you guys. You are owed that this is the future and someday it will be required, but it's not necessarily required by our profession as of today. But that leads into my first priority, and I know normally we lead with it, but I just did want to sort of demonstrate that we understand some of the restrictions you guys are always facing. We've spent some time talking to you in the last year and years before that about our Calibrate program. Just to recap, in 2019, we launched a prosecution-led diversion program, which we call Calibrate, and it gives the opportunity for usually low-level offenders to basically divert out of the traditional criminal justice system, do certain things to show that they're being accountable to the public, that they're kind of rectifying some of the things that led them down a path of mistakes, that they're paying back a debt to specific victims or society as a whole. But when they do so, they actually are able to avoid a conviction at all. So nothing goes on your criminal record. While sometimes that's important in certain cases, there's a lot of situations where having something on your criminal record can make it really difficult to find future employment or get a place to live, or maybe just a shame that's associated with the worst day of your life and that mistake. So since that time, we've graduated 150 people out of our Calibrate program. And more spectacularly, we've been able to obtain about $150,000 in restitution. That's direct payments from offenders to the people that they harmed or that they took money from. That is far, far higher than you will see from the Department of Corrections or even misdemeanor probation. And it's because of that carrot or stick. We tell them, hey, work hard on this, get it paid back, and this actually goes away. And we found that that's really amazing, positive reinforcement to them trying to better their lives. When we started in 2019, we were grant funded out of the MacArthur grant. The portions of that ended at one point, and you hard funded one position, which we were very grateful for. We've been on an upward trajectory and a growth projection within our Calibrate program since 2019, and we continue to steadily grow. We obtained another grant, I think in 2021, which was for $600,000. That was a nationally competitive grant. And we've been operating off of that since then. That pays for 2 different FTEs. It pays for the rent at the building located 1 block away and some other sort of costs and services provided in there. That grant ends on September 30th. Until January 20th, we believe that we were going to be extremely competitive in getting another grant out of the same program. So there was a grant solicitation floating out there, basically looking for the same things that we were doing and an explanation of how we would be continuing to innovate and grow in the future. And we've got a plan. We knew what we wanted to do. That grant is all pieced together. It was ready to submit, and I think we would have been highly likely to receive it. But you know what's happened with the federal budget since then. You know what's happened with federal grants. And they yanked back that solicitation. And I think it's not something that we can rely upon in the future. If the grant does come out, we will apply for it, and I hope that we're successful, but I think you shouldn't expect that. For instance, we were actually participating in another federal grant that was training prosecutors on large homicide cases, including a focus in this administration on capital offenses, which includes a death penalty. That's not something that we pursue within my office for complicated reasons I will avoid, but they even yanked the money for that. And so if you're yanking money for homicide prosecutions at the upper level, I'm worried that they're not necessarily going to be focused on reform efforts of improving our criminal justice system. So that leads to our request to hard fund Calibrate. That's a big ask. It's a lot of money. And what I put in our budget enhancement request is a number that would basically continue the program at the status quo without any changes. And to do so, that would cost an extra $213,000 a year. Now, for this year, we're paid through September. We're spending the money that we can to pay for existing programs. So we've been doing a lot of training right now. We've been trying to get some things taken care of that can be paid for under the grant, but that money dries up September 30th. So there's only 3/4 of the year remaining after that. If you chose to fund this through the remaining FY26 budget, that would be about $160,000 to continue with no changes. But what I was trying to lead in with.
Sorry, say that again.
So if you look at the very bottom of page 1, we broke it down to $212,587 is the yearly cost to operate Calibrated at existing levels.
Okay.
But because the grant pays for everything through the first 3 months of the next fiscal year through September 30th, to fund that through the next 3/4 of the year
Would be
less.
160.
Right, exactly. But what I was trying to lead in with the first 2 items is I understand the restraints you're under. It's hard for me to articulate why my office needs to be more important than other employees, why other essential services that are also getting cut and gutted because of loss of federal funds and grants are more important in my office than other people that are losing their lives and livelihoods. And I'm glad that's not a responsibility on my shoulders, because that's a really hard thing to do. And while I do feel like I owe a duty to criminal justice in this community and my employees, I recognize that that's a tough ask. So I want to be honest with you. We can continue our program in a very significantly similar form for less than that. Right now, there are 2 FTEs that are getting funded. One is an admin position that can probably be brought back in-house into the Maine County Attorney's Office. Some of the travel and other expenses that we've been using can be cut and streamlined. It won't be gold-plated. It won't be on an upward trajectory at this moment, but it can tread water while we hope for future and better budget times. There is one program specialist that if that is cut, it would immediately have the existence of our Calibrate program. So there are basically 2 program specialists that are actually supervising the people on diversion, and then we have an admin. So 3 total FTEs. If we lose a program specialist, it really is immediately that we would probably graduate people quicker than we were planning to. So we'd probably just send them a letter and say, hey, congrats, but we're just letting you off right now because we can't keep you on. And then we would decline to take future participants. And so it would immediately cut it in half. If we were going to keep one of those FTEs through 3/4 of the next year, so again, paid through September and the remaining portion, that would be about $55,000 a year to keep that FTE and continue. That is stripping out rent. That's us finding another place where we can metaphorically couch surf or something else while we continue to provide services and cut down the rest of our budget. But that would be essentially a bare bones sort of outcome to continue that. Now, I also want to be honest. We do have a traditional criminal justice method to deal with these folks. We can charge them with crimes and we can lead to conviction, and we will still do our part to make sure that we're rectifying the underlying cause of their criminal behavior, that we're treating them fairly, that we focus on things like rehabilitation. We do those no matter what the case is. But they most likely will result in a conviction because that's how the program works, which leads to my final point and the thing that I opened with. Part of Calibrate is a focus on efficiency and improvements, and it's my vision of criminal justice. There's been criminal justice reform. Some people talk about reform, and I've been troubled because they start talking about actually just not enforcing things, just letting people go, and that's never been my vision. I think accountability is critically important, but Calibrate demonstrates how that can be accomplished. You still hold people accountable, but you also hold their hand. You figure out what led them that moment. How can they avoid that same situation or bad decision making in the future? If you were to turn to the last page, you may be reminded of the Sociology Program's review of the Calibrate program, and that second to last paragraph shows the recidivism rate related to a control group that could have been accepted into Calibrate but wasn't, and the success rate of those that graduate and how they almost never commit new crimes within 1 year of being released. And so we know that it's successful. And the point of that is that it is also an efficiency gain. The reality is we don't pay our program specialists that much. We pay about half of what an attorney costs. And if you weren't able to fund it this year, I understand we don't need a new attorney this year, but we would next. In Missoula County, we know that there's about 850 offenses committed for every 10,000 people. And of those, about 70% are misdemeanors, 30% are felonies. We only take the misdemeanors in the county, but we take all the felonies. So just to use a round number, for every 10,000 people, we basically need about 3 new attorneys. So do a third of that. We need a new attorney for every 3,000 people. That means as Missoula adds about 1,000 to 1,500 people a year, every couple of years we need a new attorney. Right now, our plan with these efficiency gains, with deduplication software, with AI, with Calibrate, and some other things that actually last year you funded the Discovery program that we're just implementing right now. The idea of these is that we can do more with less, but cutting the money from the federal budget challenges us to do that. While Uncle Sam may save a few pennies, so I guess they're not even printing pennies anymore, but save some tiny, dot in the decimal far down the road, it actually will increase costs on Missoula County taxpayers by shifting this in-house to the traditional criminal justice method. So don't envy your decisions on all the difficult choices you need to make, but I'm very, very proud of this program. It's been very successful, and I do think it's cheaper than the alternative of resorting back to a traditional criminal justice sort of model. That's it.
Hey, Matt, thanks for that.
Yeah.
What's procured in the procurement contracts?
That is a great question, but I believe that is mostly drug testing.
What was that nifty stat you just had? How many offenses per 10,000 people?
Yeah, about 850 per 10,000 people.
It's a super interesting way to look at when we need new attorneys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Track.
the stats are really important, and that is something I track. Every once in a while, you need to sift through it. So, for instance, the highest crime rate in Montana is Madison County. Want to know why? Because there's almost nobody that lives in Madison County, but you got all the rich people in Big Sky getting stuff stolen out of their cars.
Oh, okay.
So you end up with these weird sort of anomalies sometimes. So they're not counted as residents, but they end up with a lot of incidents at Big Sky that are being reported. So sometimes you need to sift through the data, but we don't have those anomalies here in Missoula.
Matt, and thanks for the presentation. So the personnel line gets you a program specialist and an administrative support person.
With what's on that sheet, that's correct. One program specialist who deals with the clients. It's like almost a probation officer, and then an admin person. And what I'm trying to be really honest on is if that money does not exist to fund this, and I would hope you would, but I realize that's a tough call. Some of the admin duties can be shifted to other parts of the county attorney's office. The program specialist can.
It's essential. Yeah.
But you can actually get those 2 positions for $97,000.
Yes.
Oh, maybe I just misunderstood you. I thought the program specialist
No,
Is-
97 buys two
Buys-
FTEs.
One
Yes.
program specialist.
and one admin. Okay.
Correct. Just the program specialists alone, I ran the numbers with Fringe and with only 3/4 of the next fiscal year. And it's like 54 or 55,000 for that one position alone. 3/4 of the year, 30% Fringe.
Congrats on the program.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
Something the whole community should be proud of.
Yeah, I feel like prosecutorial diversion runs counter to what people typically think about how the justice system works.
Yeah, well, that's the key word. It's a concept of justice, which constantly needs to evolve and sort of be informed about changing circumstances. And a lot of our system we've inherited for 1,000 years, literally going back to the Magna Carta. But we need to be willing to look at better ways to do things.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have ecology and extension.
Yeah. I wanted to share after our conversation yesterday that we have some pretty amazing
You gotta
Waves.
give that to Dustin.
I know. So this is from Team Leafy Spurge, probably early 90s. I know of at least 2 Spurge Fests. The second Spurge Fest was even more obnoxious.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm just
design
gonna
is not
take this moment. Uh-huh, yep. You guys are all part, oh, yeah, you're leaving.
All right, sorry about that. All right, so I also have. Okay, so staff and I, since we moved into this awesome new facility, have had a lot of conversations about how and what we provide to the community, the resources that we provide to the community. And I think when we boil it down, what we essentially do is make life less intimidating for people that live in Missoula County. And whether that's, learning how to use your kitchen confidently and cook off recipe and cook with local ingredients, or cook and make good nutrition decisions for your family, or grow a tomato, or manage land, whatever, or figure out an energy retrofit for your home. All those things can be pretty intimidating. And so we try to make demonstrable, tangible things that people can do to make their lives better, make them feel more confident in just living in this space, which is pretty fun. We're basically like really friendly counselors. All 3 of the requests that I have before you this morning are related to those services that we provide to the community. And I kind of broke them down into 3 components of FTE associated with our office. And I kind of walk through each one of those. And then if we have questions as we go through, happy to answer those. But the first one is a garden assistant, taking it from a temporary position to a permanent 0.8 FTE for the Rocky Mountain Gardens. So as you know, the Rocky Mountain Gardens are a 3-acre free public teaching and demonstration garden associated with our department, and it was opened last September. Currently, there is 1 full-time garden coordinator that manages that. So we do lean in pretty heavily to volunteers. We have another FTE that's a volunteer coordinator. So far, well, last year we had 168 volunteers that participated in the installation of the garden. Already this year, we've had 32 volunteer opportunities. They provided 606 hours of service. The community is super invested in this space. They want to see it happen. They enjoy being part of this community. But at the end of the day, there's stuff that volunteers can't do. Volunteers don't want to do maybe. So we need the assistance out there. Up to this point, I have in here that the community fundraised almost $1 million to support the installation of those gardens. So not only do they continue to be invested in the space as coming and volunteering and spending their time and being part of this community, but they also invested financially in the creation of this space. And so I've said before with staff and in these meetings that we kind of owe it to our community to honor that investment by making sure that the space stays free and stays in the condition that they would expect and get from it what they want. We've utilized some of that support through our foundation to hire a temp garden assistant for last year and for this year. And we do have ongoing foundation support through sponsorships and other events of about 0.25% or 25% of this FTE. But it's very difficult to get commitment year after year and to bring somebody on and teach them every year. So our hope is to create this 0.8 FTE that would essentially go on furlough during the winter and then come back every year. And working with HR, that's something that we can totally do. So the full cost of that FTE is just over $51,000. With the ongoing support that we have right now of about $12,800, the request to you all is just under $40,000. And I say that we have $12,800. This is the first year that the garden's been fully open. We're seeing a ton of engagement, not just in volunteers, but people coming through the space. And I think there is additional opportunity to build outside financial support for this position. But right now, as we expend those funds that were really intended with installation and move into that, we have this like gap that it would be very helpful to have the commitment of the county to say that this position can be covered And then as we move forward, I see that percentage from the foundation or percentage of outside support increasing and the commitment from the county decreasing. So we would have this position hopefully fully funded within 5 years of with outside support.
Bryce, it's a total 0.8 FTE, correct?
Yeah, with that furlough in the winter, it works out to be about 0.8, depending on the weather and, you know, when they come on and when they would go off for the seasonality of the position. Any other questions on that one?
No.
That's great.
All right. The second one is kind of in a similar vein. This is an education assistant. We've had education assistants forever, always been grant funded. But we're really at a point now in this new space with the increased interest and excitement of being there and just being in a forward facing space that sees 75, 80,000 people a year just to come visit the Butterfly House and then introduced into all of our programs. We just have a significant uptick in requests for programming. So right now we provide structured classroom opportunities for first, second, third, fifth, sixth, seventh, and high school students through our office. In the last, I see I have a typo here, but in the 2024-2025 school year, we provided programming for just over 2,800 students in Missoula County. That was up from the previous year
Right.
of about 1,000.
Interrupt. This is just because fourth graders are just awful.
Yeah, you can't trust them.
Same with eighth graders.
That's funny. My daughter's a fourth grader.
We have an attorney.
We've really tried to focus on, we have a pretty amazing outdoor education community here, and you get into a pretty competitive space with other NGOs in the Missoula community. So we had initially started out with just fifth and second grade because those seemed to be years that didn't provide a lot of opportunity from other organizations. But as you know, as those have been out there and we've had teachers that move from being a fifth grade teacher to a third grade teacher or something like that, they've requested additional programming. So we've grown slowly, but we've been very intentional on like making sure that we're working with other organizations in the community. Stephanie and Ann right now participate in a group that's like all of those NGOs and to like coordinate across there. So there's not a lot of competition, but yeah, fourth graders, nobody wants. With this uptick, though, we're also seeing a missed opportunity in leveraging some of that interest into volunteer efforts to supplement that first request in the gardens. Right now, the AP Ecology class from Mount Sentinel comes over twice a week to spend an hour and a half in the gardens doing weeding, doing planting, doing garden design and the trials. We're getting requests like that all the time, but you need somebody to be able to coordinate and manage those programs and also kind of build them into a learning experience, not just, yeah, it's great to have 30 kids here, go weed. We want to make sure that they're getting something out of it in return. So as I said, this has been a temporary position that's been supported by grant funds that my staff is writing every year. My staff is really good at locating grants and writing grants, and to their own detriment, they would say that makes them be more administrators than educators. They're spending a lot of time doing grant reporting, writing grants, doing all of that administration component and not into the field. So they do get a gain from having that person with those funds, but they also have a loss of their time being able to also be out in the field and working with youth or adults. Again, we have ongoing grant and foundation support for this position. Right now, it's about $12,500 and committed for the next 5 years through existing grants that are going to be carried forward. And they will continue to seek out those grants, but being able to have this person on staff, not have to, again, train an educator in all these programs will be very beneficial to our ability to provide these services, both to youth and adults within Missoula County. So total cost for this FTE moving from temporary to permanent is $69,000 with that $12,500 of foundation support. We're looking at around $56,000 as a request. Any other questions on that one? Okay, and then on the backside, we have the home upgrade hub. So I'm kind of glad that everything disappeared within the OpenGov system right now, because I think this came in as 3 separate budget requests at different waves as we were trying to understand what was happening with our EPA funding. So I wrote it into this proposal as a request for the 1.4 FTE that would cover Callie and Corey moving forward. And I think there's a number of different options that we can consider to sustain the hub through this like unclear time that we're in. But we've continued to see a ton of interest in the resources that the Home Upgrade Hub provides to the community, whether it's someone just like trying to find a contractor or vet the solar company that came by their house, or try to understand tax credits and rebates or what an energy retrofit is. We've just kind of seen the snowball effect with the short time that it has been open. As you are well aware, the Home Upgrade Hub was stood up originally with $1 million grant from the EPA, the Environmental Justice Government to Government grant. That was for 3 years. That would cover the additional 1.4 FTE. We currently have 0.6 FTE that we cover for Callie's position. That funding was terminated at the end of March. We appealed that decision using their process on April 25th. And so we're awaiting, information on whether or not that appeal will go through. There's also potential litigation, a class action lawsuit that, from what I'm hearing, could come through as early as the middle of this month that would also have an injunction for the broad suite of grants that were terminated under the Clean Air Act. That would have an injunction associated with it too. And so that seems very promising that injunction would actually be successful. And as we're seeing with a number of these federal cuts, I don't foresee that being the end of the story. There's legislation that has been introduced to repeal that component of the Clean Air Act. And so this injunction would maybe carry until that was potentially successful. But that doesn't change the fact that the community wants and needs this resource. So I will also say that grant was always meant to be a runway for us to establish sustainable funding for the Home Upgrade Hub. And what's happened in the last couple months is that runway has been like real short now. And so we've already initiated those conversations with community partners to make this a real public-private partnership and to have organizations, businesses, utilities in the community provide cash support to make this resource available because they all see the benefit of that. And in those conversations, the 3 things that have really been identified is that we need someone in our community to be able to help someone walk through a whole tax rebate or tax credit program, similar to folks can go to the food bank and they can sit down with an individual and they will help them physically fill out all the applications for SNAP or WIC or whatever. That's really one of the primary gaps that a lot of our partners see, is that no one knows or no one's there to help someone walk through all of the complications of this and help get them those actual resources. The second one is that everybody's talking about the need and the value of these energy retrofits and home retrofits in our community, but we don't want to get ahead. We don't want demand to get ahead of supply, right? So we need a list of qualified and engaged contractors to support local business in our community, but also making sure that they have the certifications, that they know what they're doing, that they can talk to members of the public and that they're interested and engaged in this process. And that can't be a static list. It needs to be something that's managed and lives with the community. So as more electricians get excited about this, more HVAC, et cetera, we can grow that list and make sure that people can actually get a quality contractor. The third is that there is a huge gap in people's ability to get an energy audit for their home. And if our goal is to have people commit their financial resources to the actual retrofit that gives them either a healthier home to live in or reduces their utility bills, we don't want them to have to necessarily spend those limited resources on just getting the information that they would need to make that decision. And so having a resource in our community that can actually physically do those energy audits is very beneficial to our partners and to us and to the community. And those are three things that we really like to focus the Home Upgrade Hub on providing. And that's where we've gotten interest from these community partners, because yes, they could be doing that, but if they're doing it, then they're not like able to carry on their mission, their program. And this is something that all of them can benefit from. So this request right now is for 1.4 FTE as one time only to get us through this coming year. One, to kind of provide clarity on what happens with our federal funds and the litigation that is pending. And two, to give us a little bit of time to build that Venn diagram of funding support within our community and not have it drop completely. So we, like as an example for the $1 million grant, it was a 3-year grant. There was no possibility of extension. To lose those positions now and then have litigation start up and potentially have to pick up new employees and train them into this program, it just won't be that efficient. Or as successful as I think of being able to continue this trajectory of where staff right now has been able to go. Other options within that. So right now, Kelly and Corey are working at a 0.6 FTE. That would potentially be a reduced request here to make sure that they can cover their hours. We can continue to have this resource. We can keep them on at that level moving forward. And then if funding comes up, then we can kind of flex it moving forward.
If you were to rate these priority wise, how would you do so?
How would I do so? I would rate them as higher than any other department.
Especially the ongoing FTEs.
Yeah, I think it is a hard question because I think there's opportunity for an expanded funding picture for all three of these. I think the Home Upgrade Hub is probably primary for me. We've just set it up. People are excited. People continue to come in and ask for this resource. If that goes away, that doesn't make that need go away. Whether or not it's at this full 1.4 FTE, that's a different question. But I think I personally need to find a way to make sure that this is sustained. Gardens are going to grow regardless, and weeds will grow too. I think that picture of being able to provide outside support is probably
greater potential.
Yeah, and faster potential. So maybe that would be third, and then the youth development as second.
For a one-time expense like this, you have any cash on hand? You can.
Right now, I am covering them with cash on hand through the end of this fiscal year to keep them on. Yep. And then I will say that this number can probably be adjusted as some of the conversations we're having with community partners, and I get commitment from some of those, so I can keep that updated too to see what the community is leveraging as we move through the budget process.
Thank you, Bryce.
Thanks, Bryce.
Thank you.
Great work.
Okay, clerk and recorders.
I have good and bad news. I don't have any handouts, but I have something better than handouts.
Cash.
It's cash.
Cash and snacks.
Yeah.
So this is a request to turn our what has been a temporary employee who has been doing Matt Missoula into a full-time ongoing position for various reasons, but I'm going to actually start with the cash part because that seems like the best justification. Our association, the Clerk and Recorders across Montana, recognized that the recording fees hadn't been increased in decades. And so we were able to successfully push through an increase in recording fees, largely because while recording fees have not increased, we are seeing substantially more recordings than we did back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so this recognized there's an increased workload that accompanies that. So we anticipate that with that bill passing and going into effect starting in October, October 1st, our office will see an additional about $250,000 in revenue. And so this request is we don't have an exact amount because it's a position that will have to get classified and placed in the matrix. But we anticipate it's going to be for around 75,000 total with including fringe benefits. So we're way under what we're bringing in. You guys are making great money off this.
Good work.
With that said, I will just kind of give a brief overview. This was part of what had been the Matt Missoula program, which was a 5-year project to essentially map all of the documents dating back to the founding of Missoula County and provides sort of what you would think of as GIS is a snapshot in time. This is more like a video. So when you go on to the cadastral or missoulaproperty.us, it shows you exactly how property exists. This would show you how property existed starting or going back in time and is sort of like a slider of what it looks like back then. This has, let me put it this way. When the state of Montana adopted GIS in the late 90s, early 2000s, they commissioned a study to determine the economic benefits of having a GIS system and determined that just the presence of that system saved the state about $50 million, which is a pretty substantial amount of money for a GIS system. This is sort of the next level of GIS. Matt Missoula, unfortunately, while it was grant funded for the first 4 years, the grant funding was taken away from us immediately prior to, actually, we'd already, I think, been told we got the grant. And then Governor Gianforte decided to rescind that money and focus what had been designated for local governments to a state project. And so we lost that and we sort of hobbled through this last year of Matt Missoula. We're not completely done with the project yet, partially because of that funding, but also partially because there's been the GIS software was undergoing a pretty major update during which we couldn't do any work on Matt Missoula, but enter a different project, which really has shown, I think, the value of Matt Missoula, which is the RSID project that we've been working on, that we've briefed you on, and verifying that who we are taxing is accurate as to who should be getting taxed. This project actually almost, I don't know if it single-handedly made that possible, but if it didn't make it possible, it certainly made it much, much easier because we were able to go back. Some of these districts existed starting in 1960, and being able to go back in time and seeing what it looked like when these were initially passed has really dramatically made it easier to figure out who should be, who the accurate taxpayers are in those districts. So this FTE would transition Matt Missoula to hopefully finishing that out during the next fiscal year. But then also, I think we always understood that there was going to be a need for ongoing support for Matt Missoula because as new documents come in, they have to be mapped in a way that functions within that system and carries forward what might be legislative changes to how we view what is considered a tract of record or not. Additionally to that, this position would now sort of be the manager of those RSID lists that ensure that we're accurately taxing the folks within RSIDs. Given that Missoula County is seeming to trend at least towards the adoption of more special districts and RSIDs to pay for services, we think this is a pretty important position to have at the county to ensure that we're maintaining that accuracy going forward. So I think I've covered everything.
How much?
Again, it has to get classified and put into the matrix. We anticipate based off, because it has to be a GIS specialist. So we anticipate that it'll be about 76,000 when you include fringe benefits.
But you're still well ahead after you.
Well ahead.
That's wonderful. That's great.
And so depending on, I mean, our estimate of what that bill will bring in is based off of our sort of what has been happening. If we were to see interest rates go down, we would see a pretty substantial increase in people refinancing, which would probably supercharge that number. That being said, I don't know that interest rates are going down, so I guess I shouldn't be getting too giddy about that.
Not anytime soon.
But if you take one thing away from this, remember that we've already paid for this.
I love that. Totally got that. With more.
With more, yeah. We're
Yeah.
bringing in extra.
I just love the phrase entering the matrix. Out of that.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great news.
Yeah.
Well done.
Okay, I think. You're not Brian West.
Brian had to step up.
He is an attorney.
But he
Yes, yes,
but he is the county attorney, so he does have.
Well, yes, item number 2 for,
Yeah, so I want to make clear that this body does have the ability to close your open meeting sessions, discuss litigation in some circumstances. We do that particularly when there's certain allegations against a county, for liability. You're discussing attorney's fees, strategies, whether a mistake was made, and those types of issues. The particular discussion today on the current litigation involving HB 121, I don't necessarily think falls within those categories. It's more of a general kind of government function and decision to be made on a policy grounds of future possible lawsuits that could impact the county. Therefore, I don't necessarily think the meeting needs to be closed. There could hypothetically be discussions related to litigation strategy and future risks relating to like your modifications of bathrooms and what has been done or what hasn't. However, I don't think those necessarily need to be part of this discussion. So if the body's comfortable with it, I think you can limit your discussion today to basically deciding whether or not it's the litigation involving HB 121 is something you want to be involved with, and defer specific sort of risks or allegations from other individuals that could hypothetically involve future litigation for other meetings in the future. That was a mouthful, but it sounds good. That makes sense.
That's fine.
Okay. So you may or may not have heard of some of the initiatives in the legislature attacking transgender individuals and intersex individuals. One of those is what's a new reiteration of a bathroom bill. It's HB 121. I have a copy of it if anybody wants to see it, but it basically, in a nutshell, prohibits people of new legally defined sexes of female and male from using restrooms of genders that were not those designated at birth. And so a transgender male would not be able to use man's bathroom. Okay. The definitions within the bill do not contemplate intersex individuals at all, and that has been a real challenge in this and previous litigation and probably future litigation. It basically excludes a whole class of individuals and provides that they cannot use a restroom, perhaps, because they don't fit the definitions of a human being under Montana law. In several circumstances with similar definitions, Montana courts have found these to be unconstitutional based upon Montana's right to privacy, equal protection, due process, and a couple other grounds. The ACLU and some other plaintiffs representing specific individuals did sue over HB 121 recently, and a preliminary injunction was issued by Judge Manata in May of this year. The question before Missoula County is whether it's something that does impact the county, whether you have standing to either join as a plaintiff or whether you wanted to intervene. And so the discussion, at least within my office, is some of the future impacts on Missoula County if this did go into effect. Now, I want to be clear, there's an injunction, but that's not a final determination. That's basically hitting a pause button while the litigation continues. The issue, though, is this is an effort to pursue somewhat unique legal remedies to avoid constitutional analysis. And so what I'm getting at is essentially in Texas over the last decade or so, there's been this attempt to basically provide civil private cause of action against government employees to avoid sort of review of government actions. And so if the government just comes out and says like you can't do this, then you can challenge the constitutionality of it. But what this is allowing people to do is sue the government. And so if somebody sees somebody in a bathroom that they believe shouldn't be there under the law, they can sue the government. It's really undetermined how that's supposed to be applied. And in fact, it's so difficult to be applied to really shed a little bit of light on the motivations behind it. That even if you listen to the oral argument or read the briefs, nobody really expects this to be a huge number of cases filed against local entities. The idea is forcing transgender and intersex people sort of into the shadows and hiding and not acknowledging their gender identity. That clearly is a motivation. If you listen to testimony, that's the clear language of this legislation. So for instance, I mean, to reach some absurd results, there's no age limitation on this. And so while it does say that local governments come up with some sort of policy allowing young children to use bathrooms, does Missoula County have a policy of the certain age that you can use? Right. And so right now, if a mom has an infant boy in a bathroom changing his diaper, that is illegal under the Montana law. You cannot bring your male baby into a bathroom in a Missoula County building under HB 121. If your 5-year-old boy maybe he can use a bathroom on his own, but has an accident in the bathroom, needs his mom help, that mother cannot enter that bathroom to help clean him up or provide any assistance. That would be illegal under the law. And if someone saw that mother changing her infant baby's diaper or entering the restroom, even if nobody else was there, somebody else can sue you.
If they see her, they sue the government.
They sue you because you allowed a mom to give assistance to her child. Now I want to be clear.
Who's doing the suing just has to say
They
that
just have
saw
to-
this.
It just has to have happened.
And they unfortunately or fortunately don't actually have to have proof that the person selects the opposite gender of the restroom that they enter.
Yeah, and presumably that could be used as a tool of harassment, Chris. And so you could make that allegation and demand that somebody prove their biological sex pursuant to the law by, taking photographs of their genitals or submitting to a DNA test. And that could be sort of the scope of discovery. Now, obviously, there's some objections to that. There's a lot of questions. It's a real head scratcher under how litigation is usually worked. But that's why I want to make it clear. These are somewhat new initiatives of allowing private people to sue the government for something another private person did. This originated out of abortion challenges essentially in Texas within the last decade. And they are not really settled law throughout the country, but it's an initiative to try and avoid some of the regular constitutional challenges. Okay. And so the issue for Missoula County is the impracticability of enforcing this. You're supposed to take reasonable efforts. What are those? I have no idea. They're not specified in the law. There's no tradition or case law about the reasonableness of how you're supposed to enforce biological sex use of bathrooms. So does that mean demanding proof of people as they use restrooms? Is it only a sign? Is it only a lock? Is it having a bailiff in the courthouse basically ask people as they enter the bathroom? I don't know what the scope of the reasonableness is. It's not defined. And so that will be sifted out through litigation over years as you get sued. Okay. You can go above and beyond. You can immediately go put a lock on every single bathroom across Missoula County
Then we
buildings.
have to have individual bathrooms.
Yes, so your multi-stall bathrooms that are currently located both in this building, courthouse, at the fairgrounds, you could turn all those multi-stall bathrooms into single use. And so one person on their phone in the bathroom for 20 minutes could basically take away the ability of any other people to use that.
So is the bathroom defined as such as the entirety of the space that includes multiple stalls as opposed to the?
Yeah. So it would basically need to be a single occupancy restroom. So stalls alone would not count, even if those stalls went to the floor and the ceiling. I don't believe that.
And ask this to Chris, because I know that he knows the answer, but we have to have a certain amount of bathrooms given the amount of people that are in the building.
Building occupancy standards require a certain number of available restrooms for the amount of public traffic that is expected inside the building, as well as the staffing inside the building.
Yes.
Toilets or restrooms?
So in this case, it is actually like counting toilets, right? It's the number of spaces that are actually available. So when we talk about taking a multi-stall bathroom to now being a single-use restroom, we immediately cut to the number where we would not be able to meet that standard. The other challenge that comes into effect, so beyond the building code standard for that, is the fact that we have fire code that talks about how restrooms and other pieces of our building, how locks have to function when a fire alarm goes off in order for firefighters to safely do their job, but also for members of the public and staff to be able to go in and out of those spaces. There are no locks for restrooms that would kind of fit that. So we'd be in a situation now where we are also violating fire code. right? And then we haven't even gotten to ADA, right? The federal law around accessibility for folks with a disability, which again talks about when you have a lock on a door, what height it has to be at, how it has to function so that somebody who has limited hand use can be able to use that. How does an automatic door actuator interact with that lock? Again, none of those things are available for what we're talking about doing to a restroom. They're really not. None of those are really contemplate a bill like HB 121 as a.
It's essentially impossible to comply with. And the legislature knew that, and I don't actually think they intend to want to happen. I have not heard that, the Capitol building in Helena is changing any of their bathrooms. I think the idea, of course, is trying to force individuals to make other decisions or to disappear from public life. Now, Missoula County does have transgender and intersex employees, and there's a duty to your employees. There's also a duty of service to the public when you look at something like the fairgrounds or the hockey rink or the courthouse where the public is using it, and we haven't really accounted for these things. And so this is sort of leading to why should the county sort of be following this or be involved? Cost, fear of lawsuit, the impracticability of following the law. And so you have two options right now, or I should say three, and let's start with option three. You do nothing anyway to get sued, and you can raise some of these challenges. Okay. And it might work, but if you lose, you got to pay nominal damages and attorney's fees. And mostly this is just a bonanza for attorneys. So you could easily get $200,000 in attorney's fees for something that the actual plaintiff, the person that saw that mom and the kid go into the bathroom, might get $500 in nominal damages. So really, this is just an effort to make attorneys money. And while I'm an attorney, I think that's distasteful and not ethical. Okay. So you could just wait and see what happens. And I think that's probably what a lot of government's going to do, because they're going to shrug their shoulders and they're going to follow the arguments of the state saying, well, probably no one will sue because guess what? Transgender and intersex people have been using public restrooms since there have been public restrooms and there really have not been problems. I can tell you from a criminal justice standpoint, I've been doing this 11 years. I've reviewed literally thousands and thousands of cases, including public indecency cases, sexual assaults, and I have never come across a case where there is an issue arising simply out of somebody using a bathroom that didn't correspond with their biological sex. That is not an issue as far as public safety. It doesn't exist. So the other two options are either that you can join as a plaintiff, and that is the simplest and most straightforward manner to get your opinion across about the ways that it could damage Missoula County, cost taxpayers money, infringe upon rights of your citizenry and employees. And it frankly takes a little bit less paperwork. It's just something that you have standing to join as a plaintiff if you wanted to. Now, a lot of the arguments have already been made in this case. And so you essentially would just be trying to add the unique perspective of a government entity and what that would mean, how it's impossible for you to remodel these bathrooms, how there are issues with fire code and the ADA, and moms trying to, I don't mean to keep using moms. I'm sorry, we still live in such a gendered society. I changed half the diapers in my house, I promise. But it's a little stereotypical.
Are there other governments that are currently signed on as a plaintiff?
Not on this lawsuit, no. And I don't know if they've joined or not. I'm just not sure. You can guess that most probably aren't interested in this.
Most are going to take the first option.
Yeah, they'll wait and see, and it's probably not going to happen. And that's true. But
doesn't move this lawsuit forward.
It doesn't move it forward. And as much as I sometimes wonder if we should just sit back, we have a law that was passed and you are obligated to comply with it outside the injunction. And so if that injunction goes away, you must comply with it. And I took an oath of office when I took this position that I would follow the laws and the Constitution of the state of Montana. And sometimes those are in conflict. And when I'm presented with an ethical conflict of that, where I think there's a law passed and I'm supposed to follow it, but I think it's unconstitutional, as a member of the bar, I feel somewhat obligated to raise that with the court and make sure we get an answer to that. Your third option, though, here is similar to option number two of just joining as a plaintiff, and that's moving to intervene. And that's basically saying we've got some stuff to say in this case too, but we're not specifically a plaintiff. And there's a little bit of that going on in this litigation currently. For instance, the representative that sponsored and wrote this legislation just moved to intervene as a defendant to basically say, well, this is why I think it should exist, right? And traditionally, that's not really a legal argument that gets presented, but the legislature passed a law basically saying legislators now can intervene on their own bills or to express their interests. Intervention is likely, but not a guarantee. You also basically have to provide all the basis for your intervention, and there are times that you're limited in the scope of your participation. So it's sort of a toe in the water method rather than jumping in. And if the goal is to get clarification on the parameters of the law, your future obligations, the rights of your employees and your citizenry, and what you're supposed to do, then joining as a plaintiff is the clearest, most straightforward and direct way to be involved. The decision to join is yours and yours alone. And I sort of expressed to you some of the risks of the county and how that could go, your options for joining. But by all means, I'm sure most county governments will sit back and see if they get sued and deal with it then. And that is not necessarily wrong or a bad decision. That is a viable option, but it's punting it down the road.
Chris, what's our process for making such a decision? Do we need to do that? Does that have to be on an admin or something like, how do we?
No, this generally, when we talk about litigation, this is the process we use. You'll make a recommendation. The commission, as the representative of the corporate part of the county, right, are the ones who get sued, even though it might be some other office that takes an action. You all have the right to initiate that. It is actually Matt's office who will then do the actual work at the end of the day. So really what you're doing is kind of telling Matt Jennings what the will of the county is. And so really this usually happens as a discussion item, and then it will go forward and Matt will come back at some point, or one of his deputies will come back at some point when there's actually a filing piece of that to let you know. And at that point you would
Make a decision.
you may have another more.
So I say we unequivocally join as a
I'm ready to go right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say just so that it is part of the record and everything else, Matt highlights a couple of really important things, I think, from the administrative side of the organization, which is the fact that we do have a duty to our employees to make sure that we are providing for their needs. And one of their needs when they are at work is the ability to use restrooms, right? Like, as well as have access to, water and food, like all of the things that we are required to do as an employer. The other piece I think that's really important too for us to consider is the fact that we do provide access to the public in a variety of ways that folks both interact with on a daily basis and may just be unaware of in a kind of normal circumstance. And that is things like when folks are visiting the courthouse and we talk about restrooms. But it is, as Matt pointed out, also things like the fair or Fort Missoula Regional Park or a host of other areas where the county provides access to restroom facilities that aren't designed to be single use in any way, shape, or form. If you think about, Fort Missoula, those are all one entry, one exit kind of mass buildings that are designed for that. And certainly that is the case at the fairgrounds as well. And so the idea of turning those into single use really creates, huge issues when we start talking about things like all of the events that happen, from softball to hockey to the fair event itself, right? The largest event that the county puts on. And then we have other public amenities as well, things like Larchmont Golf Course and other things which are open and accessible to the public and should be available to all citizens of Missoula County. That is why they are in public ownership, right? As opposed to being a private enterprise where they would have the right to make some of these restrictions if they wanted to as a private entity. And that is not the space that we all occupy as public administrators. We are in that public space where our goal is to make things available and accessible to the public in a way that isn't necessarily the case for a business, right?
What does signing on as a plaintiff mean in terms of our responsibility for doing legal work?
Yeah, so ultimately there is responsibility that will fall with my office. It's something that I think that we have the capacity to do and something that we've began preliminary research on. We also have the ability to sort of borrow what other plaintiffs are doing. So this isn't reinventing the wheel. It's making sure that the unique aspects of Missoula County are being represented and we have a voice. So to the degree that other parties, either in this litigation or similar litigation, are already raising those constitutional questions, equal protection, right to privacy, those probably won't necessarily be the complete focus of Missoula County because those are already being expressed. So I really think the voice that Missoula County has, obviously specifically representing us, but as all government entities, is the infeasibility of this and how it actually impacts our employees and the citizens.
Do we need
Let's
a
do it.
motion or is it just
Just your direction to Matt, I think.
Can we say,
is
go
adequate.
kick their
go
butts?
forward?
Yeah.
Sounds good. And so would you, once we've prepared a formal filing, would you like us to return? Is that?
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
just for them to see.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hear that.
How appropriate to do this during Pride Month. So,
Yeah, well said.
Oh.
Well said.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming events, invitations.
I do not believe we have any.
Okay, have a great morning,
Everybody.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.